Thousands of students walked out of school earlier this week, and it's all in light of the surging amount of new COVID cases. This happened in the city of St. Paul district-wide. High school students and even some middle school students walked out around the lunch hour demanding administration and the school board do something about it. What they're asking is that they switch to virtual learning immediately. We heard from some students saying that they're concerned about parents who have who are immune compromised. They have siblings who are immune compromised. And every day the city is forcing them to go to school. And then in turn, they come home putting their family at risk. Ben, I attended at least one of these walkouts earlier this week and was just amazed at how well versed these students were, how clear they were about what they wanted, and the fact that they were able to articulate that this isn't only compromising their parents' health or their siblings' health, but they talked about the mental health implications that it's had on them as well to have to be the responsible one in the situation and say, hey, yes, something is not right with the decision that you guys have made for us. And it's a decision that definitely affects them, but one that they shouldn't have to be worried about.
Right. Good morning, Sister Ford. I think of that context exactly. Like, what is it? What is it to be a teenager who has to organize in their school to protect their own lives from the people who are responsible for protecting them? What do you do when the people who are charged with protecting you, this system, these schools, this entire apparatus, has decided to just throw our children to the wolves? And I'm so proud to see what they did there in St. Paul. They're standing up for themselves.
Absolutely. And Brother Mac, I know we talked about this extensively before kids went back to school. Even all of us as parents having our own dilemmas of whether or not we should be sending our kids back. To see this mass demonstration, this mass walkout, it, shows me that we have a generation that is paying attention, that is aware of what's happening, and is not just going to listen to a system that's telling it to do something when those orders contradict with what they know is the right thing to do.
And good morning, Sister Ford. And again, thank you for a wonderful story. And this is happening in Minneapolis?
This is happening in St. Paul, which is the capital city in Minnesota.
Okay. And so one of the things, that I loved about the footage is that, I'll be very frank with you, is that when we first started talking about the story, I'm thinking that when we show the video footage, we're going to show all these white kids, right? And instead, that video footage showed African-American children making a decision that says, look, we're not going to let you politicize this situation, because again, for all the reasons that they want to protest and say, let's move back to in-home learning, all of those reasons. And as you say, when you go out and talk to them, so well versed. And so when I saw these African-American children in the forefront of just good common sense in the face of, quote, leadership that is stuck on stupid, it harkened me back to May 2nd through 5th, 1963, Birmingham. There was an event called the Children's Crusade, and most of us remember Birmingham and what happened with Dr. King, but it was the children who rallied together and brought that city to a halt and led the fight in civil rights. And so that's very much what this is reminiscent of. But not only is it happening in St. Paul, it's happening in Boston, it's happening in Chicago, it's happening in cities across this country, that children are showing far more sense and far more concern for humanity than these so-called political leaders who are purely trying to politicize this situation.
Yeah, I mean, these students, they talked about their concern even for their teachers, bus drivers, the fact that some of their favorite educators have had to be out either for themselves or for their own children. And so to continue to hoard all of these bodies into a condensed area with poor or little ventilation, what do you think is going to happen?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're talking about thousands in some school, thousands of kids in a building. I mean, it's the recipe for disaster, and so it's not surprising that we're seeing an influx of teachers who are getting COVID, or they're sending their kids to school who are coming back with COVID. Bus drivers are out. I mean, if you don't have the bare essentials to run a school, then why are you trying to run a school?
That's right.
If and so I think what the determination ended up being is like 25% of teachers being out or 25% of staff being out, then they'll switch over to virtual learning. But by that point, if 25% of your teachers is out, think about what that means. That means then a quarter of your student body has been exposed to COVID. Right. Why would we're being reactionary. We're saying, if there's an outbreak and a large enough amount of people get sick, then we'll go to virtual learning. Why wouldn't you prevent 25% of your student body and your staff from getting it?
And Georgia, the other thing that I think we need to remember too is, in the case of Omicron being far more contagious than the other variants, the mask that most of us have been wearing, from what I understand, is not as protective against Omicron as the others. That's number one. Number two, I never leave. I rarely, if ever, leave my compound. I rarely, if ever, leave it. I got to admit to you both, to all of us that are listening, I am most afraid that I would contract COVID because of my son going to school and now coming back. And again, the last I talked with him when we had the discussion on this is he talked about the overwhelming number of students who are out of class because of COVID. So for me right now, I will tell you that I'm most fearful of getting COVID from my son. And not that he's not social distancing, not that he's not wearing his mask, but because he's in that environment that you so aptly described, Georgia.
That's right. And Sister Ford, I mean, and so that dovetails right back to what you were saying in terms of the mental health of the students themselves, because what does that do? Like, these kids understand what's going on. They pay attention. They have access to information. They understand how to source. We're talking about a generation that grew up with the internet. Right. Yes. And so these are kids who have now been taught you have to source your information. They understand how to do proper research. That is my hope. And I believe that that's a good assertion. That's how they find out what they need to know for themselves. And this is how we have to respect these kids' decisions, because they understand the risk that they are putting their families under. And can you imagine the emotional stress that they go through feeling responsible for bringing a virus to their parents?
And Ben, that's the point that I wanted to make, is just try to imagine that a child is responsible for bringing that virus home and it leads to something catastrophic. Just try to imagine what that child now has to live with for the rest of their lives.
For the rest of their lives. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they also demanded those N95 masks. Clearly, we know with a large number of students being on reduced lunch, some families can't afford those masks. And so they go in there with, a cloth mask that hopefully they're washing every day. But as you pointed out, those aren't as effective. So the students are saying, also, if you're going to demand us be here, then give us PPE.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's inspiring, however, I will say, to see these young folks stand up for what they know is the right thing to protect not only themselves and their mental health, but that of their family. And so I had a chance to speak to many of the kids earlier this week. My high school I graduated from, those students there participated in a walkout as well. Just about every major high school in this school district stood up and said, we should be doing virtual learning.